So a couple things before I begin my testimony. Yes, I did plan this program, and yes, I did put myself to give a testimony, and yes, that is awkward. So I just want to get that out of the way. I did this on purpose. All right. And the reason I did that is when I was in Mexico, I made a pact with myself and a pact with God that if an opportunity came up for me to give my testimony, I was going to give it. I was prepared to do that. I told him I would do that. I've done that since, and when I was planning the program, I was trying to find someone to do the testimony, and God just kept placing upon my heart that this was an opportunity that I had to be able to share what He's done in my life. And it's really awkward, especially here in this Corps, because a lot of you have known me since I was maybe a boy, maybe a baby, maybe even a teenager, but you've all known me through many different parts of my life. And I think very few of you actually know my testimony. You actually know my salvation story. And I have this feeling that when I get to know someone, I don't really know a person until I know their story. And so at this point, that's kind of when I decided, well, I've been at this Corps for a long time. There's a lot of people who've seen me grow up. And it's time that maybe they got to know me, the real me, the salvation story that God gave me and placed upon my heart. So I'd like to do that tonight. Those that don't know me, I'm an officer's kid. I grew up in the Salvation Army. My parents were officers before I was even born, and my brothers were even officer's child before I was born. So I've had a long time of being an officer's child. Many of you have seen that as I came to this Corps when my parents were Corps officers here. During my high school years, I was here, and a lot of you guys watched me grow up right in front of your eyes here in this Corps. I was a good kid. I was really good at school. It was pretty easy for me. I was good at church. That was easy for me too. I was really good at fitting the part and doing what was expected of me. I was the officer's brat, I guess, as you would say. A lot of people would say. I did what was expected. I saw the bar that my parents and the other leaders set for me, and I would reach it. I was a good kid. I believed what I was supposed to believe, and I did what I was supposed to do. And that was true up until about junior year. I was actually still a soldier at this Corps at that time. And for the first time in my life, I had spent all my life living up to the expectations of the people around me, the expectations they put for me to reach. I reached them. I didn't push the boundaries. I didn't break the rules. I did exactly what I was supposed to do up until that time. Now, I was in a relationship with a girl, and for the first time in my life, I pushed the boundaries that I was given. I was pushed beyond where my parents told me I should go, and it was the first time I really bent the rules, first time I really went outside of that good kid mold that I had lived in for so long. And for the first time, I decided I was done living up to other people's expectations. I was done trying to fit this mold that everyone else wanted me to be in, and I realized I didn't even know who I was because I was told my entire life who I was supposed to be. And so I set off on this journey to try and find out who it was that I was. I was going to find out who Jeremiah Hinson was. And so I adopted a new lifestyle choice. I decided I was going to try everything once before I knocked it. Anything that I hadn't tried, I was going to give it a try. Why not? So that eventually led me to marijuana. I eventually started smoking quite heavily in my senior year. I was still a soldier here. I still attended church. I actually taught Sunday school. I was really good at fitting the part I was supposed to fit, but at the same time doing what I wanted to do. I was done trying to fit into that, and I was beginning to stretch out to find out who I was. And that led me to things like drugs and drinking and just everything that I was told not to do. And so keeping that mantra, that new idea of how I was going to be, I left here, I left Clearwater, and I went to college, and I went to the University of Florida. It was the first chance I got to really leave my parents, leave my house, leave my rules, leave my church, leave everything that I had been built up around, everything that I had been enclosed in, as finally a time when I could break free of that and become who I thought I was really supposed to be. When I got to UF, I joined a fraternity. I thought it was the coolest thing. I had friends instantly. It was a hard time moving to Gainesville. I didn't know anyone there, so I instantly had friends. I had an outlet to do all the many things that I had been looking to do, the things that I had been unable to do while I was at my parents' house or while I was being guarded or sheltered. I was finally able. I had an outlet to go and do those things. And I really did live it up. I did everything and anything that I was offered. I did. I said, I'm gonna try it. If it's not bad, if I don't think it's gonna harm me, I'll keep doing it. And that eventually built up a lifestyle around that. I attended parties quite often. I stopped going to classes. I started to fail on my classes. I got a really heavy drug addiction that I began to do. I even at one point began selling drugs so that I could continue to do drugs because I was out of money at that point. Just really kind of pushed myself as far as I could, as far away from everything I could. I decided once I left my parents' house, I was going to be an atheist. I didn't really believe in this God and this whole religion that I spent my entire childhood a part of and seeing from the inside, and I just saw so many things that I disagreed with, and I never really felt like God ever spoke to me. I never felt like I had any experience with this Jesus they always talked about. I just knew he was the answer to most of the questions, and that was good enough for me back then. And it was finally time for me to find out what I really believed. So I claimed to be atheist. I left the church. I left the Salvation Army behind. All my friends, all my family, I kind of cut out of my life for a year. And then I fell into some debt issues. I owed money to the fraternity that I couldn't pay because I had spent all the money I had on the party lifestyle that I had. And I was really stuck. I was in a place that I didn't know how I was going to get out. And it came that time when my parents kind of found out some of the things that I had been doing, and they're very kind of understanding, of course not happy about it, but they helped me out of my financial problems, and I told them I was going to turn it around, I was going to go back to Gainesville, and I was going to make things better. I went back to Gainesville, I got a job, and it looked like I had turned things around. To everyone that saw me, it was, I was doing much better. I wasn't really doing the things I wasn't supposed to be doing anymore, but little did they know it got worse at that point. I started to do more of the things I was told not to do. Again, I was still selling drugs so that I can continue to do drugs because I couldn't afford to do them anymore. And that lifestyle crushed me. It pushed me beyond a place I had never seen. I lived such a happy childhood. Never knew what depression was. Never knew what evil really was, what sin really meant to your life. And then I dived headfirst into it, and I suffered the consequences. Eventually, I slipped into a pretty bad depression. I had lost most of my friends in Gainesville because of dropping out of the frat. Most of the people that I had met in that first year, I couldn't really have contact with anymore. And so I was stuck in this place trying to find out who I was, hating who I was at the time, trying to find some kind of meaning, some kind of something to hold on to get me through things. And I wasn't finding it. Obviously, I wasn't searching the right places. But there's one night in particular that was really bad. I'd had a couple bad weeks with my friends, and things weren't falling into place, and I just felt like something was just utterly wrong, and I couldn't get myself out of the feelings I was stuck in. I remember coming home from a club pretty intoxicated, and I went and I attempted to take my life. I didn't plan on waking up the next morning. I texted my friend and said, listen, I'm doing this. I'm done with all of this. I can't take it. I don't really know who I am, and I don't like who I've become, so I'm kind of tired of doing it. So I sent him that. I went to sleep, and I didn't expect to wake up. But God didn't quite let me in there. I woke up the next day and realized that something had to change. I saw the text message I had left, and I was sick for about a week afterwards because of what I'd done to myself, and I knew that I was not where I was supposed to be. I knew something was utterly wrong with where I'd ended up and where I'd gone. And then randomly in that time, I got a call from Tony Bellis. A lot of you may know him. He's the caretaker at Camp Keystone. Completely out of the blue, calls me up and says, I need you to be a lifeguard for a weekend camp. You come out and work and we'll pay you to be a lifeguard. That time, I still needed money pretty bad, so I was like, all right, that's fine. I had previously worked weekend camps before, so it was something that was known to me, something that I enjoyed to do. So I began going back to camp. I began going back to the Salvation Army. For me, it was a job, but little did I know God was using that. Kind of opened the doors for me. I started seeing a lot of my friends that I had forsaken, a lot of the friends that I pushed aside for about 2 years. I finally saw them and realized that they had something that I used to have that I didn't have anymore. And I decided I was going to move to Tampa. I was going to go in the college house, and I was going to go back to life as I used to be, and I was going to, follow all the rules again and be the good kid. And through that, I made the plans to leave Gainesville. I started making plans to move to Tampa. I decided I was going to work at camp during the summer, so I got a job at conservatory. Began working there that summer, and it was still while I was in Gainesville. I was still very lost and still, to me, Tampa was just a way to escape. It wasn't really a destination to get to. It was just a way to get away from where I was. And I was on the bus. I had a book that I was reading that my dad had given me. It's called The Reason for God. And I was sitting on the bus and I was reading this book, and I was still very much seeking out what I believed in. I hadn't quite accepted God was real yet, but I thought, why not figure it out for myself? So I began to seek that. And this guy, Kyle Chacon, sat next to me, and he looked at me, and he asked me what I was reading. That's all he did. And I told him what it was, and I told him why I was reading it. He invited me to play soccer. That was it. It was probably the most nonchalant conversation I've ever had. And through that, I started to take steps with his church there. I started to hang out with Christians. I started to realize some of the things that I had been missing, but I had already set in place that I was going to be leaving. So that was a good friendship and a good step in the right direction. And while I was in that time of depression, while I was in that state, God placed something on my heart. He gave me the image of the prodigal son, and I realized my entire life was word for word what that parable said. I had been with my family. I had been in a state of innocency. I was in happiness. I was in purity. And I disobeyed, and I gave that up, and I left. I left everything I had and everything that I was, and went and tried to seek out my own fortune, my own way. And I was hit by this image that I had known in Sunday school for so long, but never quite understood about the prodigal son and how I had literally lived it out. And so when I went to conservatory, I went to TMI and TYI that year, and during praise and worship, I remember very vividly, I was hands raised in the air, crying out to God because I just knew that something was missing, and I just cried out for what it was. And before I knew it, I was down at the front on my knees, surrounded by friends that I had forsaken, people praying for me, letting me know that it was okay. And for the first time, I felt God's presence in my life. I felt that embrace that's pictured in the prodigal son. When you come home and you see your father running towards you, and I got to experience that firsthand. When I wanted to end it, God wouldn't let me because he had a plan for me. I disobeyed, I spat in God's face, and I was justly exposed to the wrath of God. And what I was given in return was mercy and grace. And he's got me to where I am today. I am happy, and I am sober, and I am fulfilled, and I am surrounded by people I love. And there's so many things happening in my future that God has placed there. He has redeemed me in so many ways that I can't express. He has brought me from the lowest place that I could experience to here, to where I am right now before you, a happy and fulfilled person. And I love him for that, and he can do the same thing for you. You just kind of want it. You got to return. You got to come back to experience that embrace. I hope you do that. Thank you.